So, every February 20th, the world marks the World Day of Social Justice. But, beyond just a date on the calendar, what's the actual state of fairness in 2026? We're going to break down the key reports for this year to really understand the promises, the problems, and, well, the part we'd all play in this. Let's dive right in. It really all boils down to this one massive question. Forget all the high-level politics for a second. Is the world we're building right now fairer than the one we had yesterday? It's a pretty simple question, but man, it has a really complex answer. And the documents for this year's observance, they give us a fascinating and sometimes pretty sobering look at where we actually stand.
Okay, so first things first, it's so important to understand that this day isn't just about awareness. Nope, the UN set it up as a global rallying cry. Think of it as a yearly push to tackle those deep structural inequalities that hold billions of people back from living with dignity and security. It is, quite literally, a call to action.
And this year's theme is incredibly direct: renewed commitment. That language? It's no accident. It's a direct follow-up to the 2025 Doha Political Declaration. That was a huge UN summit where world leaders made some big promises on global development. So the goal for 2026 is to turn all that high-level talk into real, concrete action, into what the UN calls lived realities for the people who need it most. So how are they going to do it? Well, the whole mandate focuses on three key pillars. First up is empowering inclusion. That means making sure groups that are often just ignored, like indigenous peoples and migrants, actually get a seat at the table. Second, bridging the digital divide, which now specifically includes tackling the new challenges of AI. And third, strengthening social protection for the, get this, 2.1 billion people working in the informal economy, who usually have zero safety net. We're talking no health insurance, no pension, nothing.
All right, so promises are one thing, but the data? The data tells the real story. Let's shift gears and look at the numbers that make this whole mission so incredibly urgent. This is the 2026 reality check. Just let this number sink in for a second. 408 million. According to the International Labor Organization, that's the global jobs gap for this year. To put that into perspective, that is more than the entire population of the United States. It's the number of people all across the globe who want a job but just can't find one. It really shows you the sheer scale of this challenge.
And what's really telling here is how that unemployment is spread out. While the overall global rate is sitting around 4.9%, just look at the rate for young people. It's 12.4%. That is more than double. This is such a stark illustration of how the next generation is disproportionately struggling just to get a foothold in the economy. And the disparity just doesn't stop there. This number really shines a light on the persistent gender gap. In 2026, women are still over 24% less likely to be in the labor force than men. And a lot of this is driven by things like unpaid care work and systemic barriers that keep women out of so many new and growing industries. And all of this brings us to a really crucial point, which is summed up perfectly in this quote. Social justice isn't some happy accident that just happens when the economy is booming. No way. It has to be designed. It requires deliberate, coordinated policies that are built from the ground up with inclusivity in mind. Of course, the challenges we're up against today are not the same ones from a decade ago. Let's move on and look at how modern issues, we're talking artificial intelligence, climate change, are completely reshaping the entire conversation around what fairness and equity even mean.
A really key concept for 2026 is this idea of tech equity. And this isn't just about who has access to technology. It's about fighting against things like algorithmic bias in hiring software, and maybe even more importantly, making sure that the wealth and productivity that comes from automation doesn't just benefit a tiny few, but is actually shared across society.
And in a similar way, as we tackle climate change, the idea of a just transition is now absolutely central. The principle is simple. As we move to a green economy, we can't just abandon the workers and the communities that powered the old one. This means we have to actively create retraining programs and support systems for people in industries like coal mining, so they aren't just left behind.
So, okay, we've seen the problems, we've seen the new complexities. But what is actually being done about it? This section is all about how the global community is trying to turn those big promises into real, on-the-ground action.
And wow, this table just shows the sheer breadth of the global response. You've got everything from a high-level UN meeting in New York to translate that Doha Declaration, all the way to India reaffirming its constitutional commitment to justice. And then you see South Africa launching new policies for informal workers and Pakistan expanding its income support program. We're seeing actions, big and small, popping up all over the world. Now, it's really easy to see all this as, distant global stuff. But this final part of our explainer is all about bringing it home. Why does any of this matter to you, in your community, in your day-to-day life? Because here's the thing, at its core, social justice isn't some abstract diplomatic term. It is tangible. It's the difference between someone earning a wage they can actually live on versus being exploited. It's about whether your community has the resources it needs to get through a crisis or if it just collapses. It literally affects everything. And that means we all have a role to play here. The source material lays out some really clear, actionable steps. First, use your power as a consumer. Support ethical businesses. Second, educate yourself on tech bias and demand transparency in the digital tools that are shaping all of our lives. And third, and this might be the most important one, actively listen to and amplify the voices of marginalized people, the ones who are too often ignored. If you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this. This is probably the most powerful takeaway from the 2026 reports. The message is crystal clear. The poverty and inequality we see in the world are not inevitable. They aren't natural, like bad weather. They're the direct result of choices, policy choices, business choices, and our own societal choices. And so that leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. If inequality is the product of the choices we've already made, well, then a more just world is also just a choice away. The question isn't whether we can build a fairer world. The question is, what choice will we, all of us, make next?